Well, I'm coming along to Hutchinson Square today. With me is Simon, an author, who's come over to do some promotion of the Island of Extraordinary Captives. And now, the reason we're here at Hutchinson Square is because most of it is centred around here, which was prisoner of war camp. How do you describe it? Internment camp, you know?
Yeah, internment camp. So these were individuals who had fled typically to Britain in the run-up to the war. They'd been offered refuge and asylum. Most of them were Jewish refugees who were fleeing Nazi oppression, had come to Britain, and then war breaks out, and suddenly we've got thousands of German and Austrian passport holders living among us. At first, it's sort of, that seems fine, and the government decides to set up tribunals that will interview every one of these individuals to sort of test their story, make sure they are who they say they are. Then in May 1940, the Battle of France starts. The German forces invade Holland, and all of these stories start coming through to Britain that there had been a network of supposed refugees in these countries who had, during the invasion, actually come out and shown themselves to be Nazi supporters and had aided the invasion of these countries. So suddenly, newspapers pick up the story in Britain, and there's this nationwide panic that actually maybe the refugees we allowed into the country in the months and years leading up to the war are perhaps not who they said they are. Maybe they're here waiting, a fifth column as it was termed at the time, waiting to support a Nazi invasion. And so sort of in this mood of national paranoia, the British government decides to intern all German and Austrian and Italian men between the age of 16 and 60, and then later on in May they expand that to also include women and children, many of whom were brought here to the Isle of Man and put in one of 10 internment camps here on the island, one of which was here in Hutchinson.
This got a reputation for being artistic and that sort of thing. How did that even come about?
Well, the Nazis had hounded out really lots of Jewish culturally interesting people. So that included university lecturers, musicians, filmmakers, actors, and many, many artists. So this sort of surge tide of quite interesting people had come to Britain as refugees, but of course in this mode of panic the government's not distinguishing between what your job is or what your past is. If you've got a foreign, you're a so-called enemy alien, then you're sent to one of the camps. And it was just sort of through happenstance that a great density of really quite brilliant people happened to come to this camp in particular.
You talk about density. I mean, it was quite nice, I believe, at the beginning, but then they really started to pack the people in here at one stage, didn't they?
Yeah, so the camp opened on the 13th of July 1940, and pretty soon has more than 1,200 people here. And so in the boarding houses around us, which were requisitioned and put over to house the internees, typically you'd have maybe between 5 or 10 sort of holiday makers here normally, but then during the internment there were up to 35 men put in each house. So it's quite cramped conditions, that's for certain.
Now, you've written this book, and I've got to say, this is your first time to the Isle of Man. You had to write this during all the COVID situations. Was that a tricky thing? I mean, and what did you feel like when you actually finally saw it? I think they could have done well with it, personally, but what do you think?
Well, yes, I mean, much of the work was spent really tracking down family members of people who were interned here, interviewing them, seeing what documents they have, and then also there's a great deal of documentation in the National Archives in London and in various other museums and archives around the country. And then here on the Isle of Man, the Manx Museum was very helpful in scanning and providing me with documents as well. And then there are also lots of oral histories that were recorded by former internees, in the 70s and 80s. So it was sort of piecing this all together like a massive jigsaw puzzle. But yes, to finally come here in the flesh is pretty amazing.
Well, they could do more with it, right? Do you think there's potential? I don't know, but there's not much celebration of this whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I mean, the internment episode is something that's sort of been kept a bit from the mainstream history of the Second World War.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to a certain degree that's because it's a slightly shameful episode for Britain. We locked up thousands of people who were already enduring the trauma of leaving their lives behind and their jobs and their livelihoods on the continent, coming here seeking refuge and asylum. we welcome them with open arms, and then suddenly they find themselves in internment camps. Many of the individuals, even here at Hutchinson, had come across on the Kinder transport, which are very famous for, it's a very famous story of something great that the British did in terms of providing young German and Austrian children with a place to come, and then they find themselves here behind barbed wire. So yes, I think it's something that has not been discussed as much as it could be. Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking to us. Beginning of February, this came out, 3rd of February, The Island of Extraordinary Captives, available, all good bookshops, priced.
I think the hardback is £20, I think,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Well, it's something for everyone here. I'm sure it'll be something very worthwhile looking at, and nice pictures in there as well. Some very unique pictures.
Yeah, so some of the families of both the guards and the internees very kindly gave us permission to use some of their images. So
because it wasn't allowed to be filmed, of course, you actually could get yourself in trouble if you took some pictures of these sort of things.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it just so happened that the camp commandant here at Hutchinson was a keen amateur photographer. So he took many pictures, which are really some of the only pictures that exist from within an internment camp, and it just happens that they include many of the artists who happen to be here.